The New York Mets have let two of their biggest stars go in free agency and what has been a depressing and frustrating 24 hours for the New York Mets fans. What this means with David Stearns going forward, how can the Mets rebound, and why this strictly puts David Stearns in the crosshairs of all Mets fans. All that coming up and much more here on this episode of Rich Sports Talk. The New York Mets are without their all-time home run leader and the closer that has the third most saves for them in their history. In the span of 24 hours, we'll break down the Edwin Diaz contract, Pete Alonso going to the Baltimore Orioles, all my thoughts and much more. And again, your comments, super chats, jump to the front of the line. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our latest videos. And, of course, check us out wherever podcasts are available. For Mets fans, it's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel misled today because this has been a frustrating 24 hours. And this was something that many of us didn't think could happen. Now, again, warning signs were there with Pete Alonso. But when we came to this offseason, I think we played scenarios where maybe one or two of them would be gone. But many of us didn't think that Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso and a cherry on top, Brandon Inman, would all be gone this offseason. And I'll say this for David Stearns. David Stearns has put himself in an unenviable position because he has put himself in the crosshairs of a ferocious thing called the New York Mets fandom. Because the New York Mets fan is in a very precarious situation right now. And the optics of these moves, compiled with what happened last season, are bad. Everyone's looking to put blame around, and I've seen a lot of people blame Steve Cohen. If anything, these moves have told me one very important thing. David Stearns is running this show, and he is basically being allowed to run the show right now by Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen, I think, had a hand in bringing Pete Alonso back last year, and I think that might have rubbed David Stearns the wrong way. It's clear that he really wanted Juan Soto, but this year it is all David Stearns' show. He is in charge of all the operations and basically getting the vote of confidence from ownership above. The problem is the last 12 months for Met fans has been a roller coaster, and you've been told by this franchise one thing and have been giving another thing. If you remember last April, this ownership called out Mets fans. They called out each and every one of us, and they said, fill our building. We're going to give you something special. And we did. We set attendance records at Citi Field for the first time. But what did we get in return? After the best record in baseball, we got 3.5 months of uninspired, mistake-laden baseball and the slow depth of the Mets as they creep toward an 83 and 79 finish. And I get what some people are going to say, and I agree with parts of it. The core needed to be blown up. This team needed to be blown up in new ways. And again, in the grand scheme of things, I agree with moving on from Brandon Inman, open up that contract. But when the Mets let Edwin Diaz go, I thought that was a huge mistake. This is clearly a closer who is one of, if not the best closer in baseball. The fact that they did not get this locked up before the end of the season, the fact that they allowed him to go to the Dodgers. And I know what the Mets saying, I can't believe he didn't come back with a counteroffer. Well, that's the problem when you test free agency. Sometimes you get what you wanted, and Edwin Diaz got what he wanted. He wanted to be the highest paid reliever on an annual salary. He got that from the Dodgers. You could have given him more, but here's the problem. The Dodgers and the Mets need to learn this. Until you win World Series, there's going to be a little bit of a tax because the Dodgers have a couple things that going for them. I don't know if you've heard this, but they've won the last 2 World Series. They're in sunny Southern California. There's a lot of things to really like about the Los Angeles Dodgers. And yes, for people that want to kill Edwin Diaz and want to kill him for ring chasing or going to the Dodgers, I don't kill him. The Mets had every opportunity to lock him up this season. They had every opportunity. And what I think was the final nail in the coffin was when this team went out to get Devin Williams. And it's come out that he was pissed that they signed another closer, or basically perceived closer, without letting him know. And I know technically he's not a member of the New York Mets. But if you want to create a great environment for these players and for this team, I think communication is key. Because Edwin Diaz, I think, took that a bit to heart. You know, he's a guy that's put the Mets on the national stage with that entrance. He's been one of the most electrifying players for this team the last 2 years. And, oh, by the way, he probably was the best player the Mets had this season and was one of the reasons they had some shot down the stretch despite their incompetence in the front end of the rotation and in the handling of this bullpen. It's just so frustrating with Edwin Diaz to see him go for just $3 million. It's bad optics. And again, it's not necessarily Steve Cohen's fault, but it's bad optics when we keep getting the reports about the billions of dollars that Steve Cohen's going to invest in a casino across the parking lot from Citi Field. But the Mets can't come up with an extra $3 million to pay Edwin Diaz. And Edwin Diaz, if this was a 5-6 year contract, that's one thing. But it's one thing that the Mets should have learned from the Giants with Saquon Barkley. If he's going to go to a team that you have to go through, pay a little extra. If you knew he was negotiating with the Dodgers, don't leave it up to chance. Just get the deal done. Because here's the sad thing. The Dodgers had probably one weakness. It was the back end of their bullpen. Guess what? It's not a weakness anymore. And you want to compete with the Dodgers, well, it just got a lot harder going through them. Let's shift gears to Pete Alonso, and then I'll give my thoughts deeper on David Stearns and why I think this is going to be a very difficult offseason for him. Pete Alonso is a well-beloved Met, but it is made clear, and I think this also leads to a bigger issue, which I'll address later in the show, which I think the Mets in this front office have to worry about, that the Mets and David Stearns specifically weren't in love with Pete Alonso. They didn't mind dating him, but last year, this front office played a game of chicken with Pete Alonso, and they lucked out. They got him on the deal. He balled out, and then he comes back up the bat. See? I proved what I could do. You gave me a prove-it deal, and I did it. And the Mets are like, you know what? We're good. Because from all reports, the Mets didn't even put an offer because they didn't think they'd be close. Well, the Yankees put an offer on Aaron Judge, if you remember. That was a lot less than the Giants. But Aaron Judge is like, you know, I really like what they're building here in New York. I really like being the star here. I'll take a little less to stay in New York. Could the Mets have given 5 years, come closer to like maybe $145 million with performance bonuses or prorated money and kept him? Because I'll let you know a little secret, David, sir. I know Pete Alonso, he's not a great defensive first baseman, but there's something that the National League has now. It's the DH. You could have made him this team's long-term DH for 3 or 4 years, having that thumper in that lineup. Because guess what? This lineup, which may I remind you, I know defense is special, and I know how run prevention is your favorite phrase. But you also need to score runs, which is something that this team didn't do enough of last year. And now, when you look at this lineup, in the span of a month, try to replace this with Alonso and Nimmo. And again, I was a fan of the Nimmo deal. I think he's declining faster than people want to admit. And overall, I think it was good to get out of that contract. But at the same time, my thought was kind of like what happened with Devin Williams. Well, they're getting rid of Nimmo because they're going to keep Alonso. Well, they're signing Devin Williams, but they're still going to keep Edwin Diaz. And little did we know, neither was going to happen. Between Alonso and Nimmo, how are the Mets and David Stearns going to – you talk about run prevention. How are you going to add this run production? Alonso and Nimmo last year combined 63 home runs, 218 RBIs, and 168 runs between them. Can I ask you who's hitting behind Juan Soto right now? I can't come up with a good answer. And the big thing with this is this. The optics are really bad for David Stearns when he ran out to get Devin Williams. And look, Devin Williams, if he's right, is a top 5 closer. But last year, he struggled with the Yankees, and he didn't sell down to as a middle reliever. And if you were to tell me Devin Williams was going to be the 8th inning guy with Diaz in 9th, great. But now Devin Williams in the 9th, I'm not so sure. And it's also not a great option that you're going after players that you had in Milwaukee. And I know you have a connection, but could you expand the circle a little bit, look for other players a little bit? But I do think that there is a major problem that no one has really discussed with the Mets. And I think it is very important, especially if you want the long-term health of this team and if you want this team to be successful like the Dodgers for a long time. Pete Alonso's contract is alarming to me, not because the Mets didn't sign it, but because of what it represents. He is a hometown grown talent. He is the home run king for the New York Mets. And many Met fans, myself included, were hoping he'd finish his career or finish most of his career with the New York Mets. David Stearns and Steve Cohen say they're lifelong Met fans. Have they not felt the sting of seeing some of these great players go? And Pete Alonso, I understand the metrics aren't great. I understand that he's not a great defensive player. But you have the DH. He's going to hit you 35 home runs a year for the next 3 or 4 years. It's not like Pete was asking for a 7 or 8 year contract. He was asking for 5, and especially Diaz was only asking for 3. I just look at this and I go, if you're a Met player coming up in the system, how do you feel? Because think about this. Brandon Nimmo was a lifetime Met, drafted in the first round, gets traded. You look at Edwin Diaz, came here in a trade, persevered, was great, became a great Met. See ya. And more damning is Pete Alonso. You can make the case Pete's been the face of this franchise. The old-time home run king for the Mets. Okay, see ya. So if you're one of these young players like a Carson Bench or something, when you finally get that contract, are the Mets going to nickel and dime you? Because here's the other thing that is playing into this and why I think Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso and why other Mets are offended. The thing is, when you make certain decisions with your front office and you make certain investments, you're sending a message. And you've said since buying the Mets, especially for Steve Cohen, this is a big market team. We're going to outbid everyone, despite not doing it this offseason. Pete Alonso came up through this system. Pete Alonso, they tried to nickel and dime him. Basically, last year, no one was giving an offer. They said, Pete, go out and show us what you can do. He has over 120 ribbies, 38 home runs, has an incredible season. And the Mets said, yeah, you did great, but we don't love you. Meanwhile, the Mets have invested over $1 billion in Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto. And look, they're tremendous players. They're great all-around players. They're younger players at the time. I understand investing in those players. I'm not knocking investing in those players. But if you're Pete Alonso and you're Edwin Diaz and you see how much they went out in their way to talk about the pursuit. I mean, the Mets made a documentary last offseason about the pursuit of Juan Soto and how important it was and how many meetings they had with the family, how they would fly out, how Steve would get one of his mansions ready to host Juan Soto. Did Steve open up a mansion for a negotiation with Pete? Because Pete Alonso was at the winter meetings, basically driving an hour and a half to talk to teams. The optics, to me, do not come off great for this front office. And the problem with David Stearns is this. I think that a lot of what he thinks is a good thing. Again, I don't think that the Mets should just spend money wildly. I don't think you can do that and build a sustainable team. And the way he's handled the pitching and with their pitching lab, again, I think for the most part is smart. Because you look at the Kodai Senga contract. The Mets have been locked into that contract. He's been getting injured. You look at a lot of these long-term pitching contracts and the way pitching arms last nowadays, they last 7 to 8 years. And by the time they hit free agency, do you really want to give a 5 or 6 year contract and probably not get the most of it? So I get the principle, like especially at the back end, taking risks on 1 year players. But last year, it felt like every move that David Stearns made was the absolute wrong one. Outside of Clay Holmes, which became a really good risk, Every other move, apart from Juan Soto, was a disaster. Frankie Montas, the Mets had to give him $34 million for 2 years. Missed the start of 2025, 6.28 ERA, elbow surgery, and basically was released last month by the team. Sean Manaea gave him a 3-year, $75 million deal, was injured, 5.6 ERA in 15 appearances. Jesse Winker, 1-year contract, $8 million, played 26 games, 229. AJ Minter, a deal I liked, gets hurt early. Stanek, brought in again, $4.5 million, 5.30 ERA. Griffin Canning, $4 million, which is a signing I think they should be targeting. Great ERA, season-ending Achilles. He's someone I'd like the Mets to bring back if I'm personally honest. Pete Alonso, again, kind of forced the hand by ownership to make the move, and I guarantee you, I think that's part of the reason why they're letting him do it this offseason the way he wants to, because I guarantee you he's like, let me run this operation. But the problem is when the Mets season was still alive, when the Mets season needed a pulse, what were the in-season moves to save the season? They were Gregory Soto, who had a 4.5 ERA in 25 appearances. Tyler Rogers, again, incredibly reliable pitcher, but they had to send Jose Budo and Blake Tidwell there. Rogers, 2.30 ERA in 28 appearances, a half run higher, still would bring him back if possible. But the other moves, Cedric Mullins, 182 average. Oh, by the way, they didn't get a starting pitcher, which they desperately needed at the time, and waited way too long to call up the kids. And, of course, Ryan Helsley, 22 games, had a 7.20 ERA, which seems low, relatively speaking. 4 blown saves, 0-3 record. And David Stearns, the problem is you're asking Met fans to trust that after a season where they feel burned by going to Citi Field, spending all that money, and watching a team basically die for 3.5 months without you doing anything to help with them on life support. And now you're telling us, trust me that I'm going to build a great team. But the optics of how they've handled Edwin Diaz, how they weren't more aggressive, like they seem more aggressive to get Devin Williams than Edwin Diaz. And they let Edwin Diaz talk to the New York Giants. The second Edwin Diaz started talking with the New York Giants, the LA Dodgers, I would have said, you know what? Pay him what he wants. We cannot let him go to the Dodgers. But they didn't. Pete Alonso, the thing that really will irk me is they didn't even offer a contract. Even if they felt it was a low ball offer, at least say that you gave an offer. Because all offseason, well, we have a good relationship with Pete. Well, we like Pete. You haven't. Actions, I always say, speak louder than words in the words of sport. You can say whatever you want at a press conference. You can smile. And David Stearns likes to smile a lot and tell us how it is. But action speaks louder than words. If David Stearns really wanted him to be a long-term part of the Mets, they would have given him a massive extension last year. They would have done everything they could have to make sure Pete Alonso wasn't going anywhere. They played a game of chicken and surprisingly won that game of chicken. Maybe David Stearns felt that was the best year he was going to get out of Pete Alonso. But I'll tell you this, if the Mets start off poorly, Citi Field's going to be a ghost town by June because Met fans are going to say, all right, prove it. We're not coming back until you show us a valuable product. The other thing, too, is what if Pete Alonso gets off to an unbelievable start? What if the Dodgers run away with baseball, which many of us think, and Edwin Diaz looks incredible out there? Edwin Diaz was a lot of the heart, and he made going to Citi Field an event. Like, let's be honest. How many Met fans would go to Citi Field in the hopes of just catching that entrance? Just to be a part of that atmosphere when Edwin Diaz came in to finish off a game. I mean, what are the Mets going to do now with Devin Williams? They're going to play like Avatar The Last Airbender theme because that's his nickname. How are they going to replace this offensive production? Is it Cody Bellinger? Again, I don't think they're going to go fully for over 3 or 4 years. And you're going to give Cody Bellinger a long-term contract, but not Pete Alonso. Kyler Tucker, I think, is a good hitter, but I don't think he's replacing the production unit. And the problem, too, is I look around this lineup. Jeff McNeil, I don't want on this team, but he's still here. Is Brett Beatty going to be the everyday third baseman, or is Mark Vientos the everyday DH? I mean, if Mark Vientos had a season like he did the year before, I think that would have made this a little bit easier. If Mark Vientos finished with, let's say, 25 home runs, 90 RBIs, and they said, we're going to have Vientos be our DH or first baseman, it would have been a little easier to stomach. It's like, okay, we don't love it, but Vientos is under control. Vientos is slightly less production, but, it's just really clear. And Ron Darling on the loss of Pete Alonso, you've now paid, unless you get a bat, Alonso walk 150 times a year. I mean, that's the other thing. Juan Soto is not going to get a pitch to hit now. You let a guy that has 264 career home runs in 7 seasons walk out that door without much of a fight. I think that's what Met fans are more disgusted, because it just doesn't seem like there was much of a fight. And now there's this update from Tim Healy that the Mets are considering a first base option of Jeff McNeil and Paul Goldschmidt. I'll make this very simple. I don't want Paul Goldschmidt on this team, and I don't want Jeff McNeil on this team. Jeff McNeil is not a good player. Jeff McNeil, to me, at this point, he's not worth the contract they're playing, and he is a utility player. He is not an everyday player. And look, we'll judge this offseason at the end, and more importantly, we'll judge this team on how they perform on the field. But I will say this, David Stearns got a lot of work to do, and he better get on this fast, because Mets fans are pissed. They are angry. And it's coupled with the fact of how last season ended. But you have to now take this money and the money you saved, because you saved a lot on Edwin Diaz. You didn't want to go to $69 million. Okay. You don't want to go to $31 million a year. Fine. That's one thing. Sorry, I got those figures mixed up a little bit. But Pete Alonso, okay, you don't want to invest 30-something million a year. All right. What are we talking about? Over $50.5 million on the board? You better invest in players. You better get aggressive on the trade market. If you somehow can trade pieces to get basically like Fernando Tatis, I would be on him. Play left field, big righty bat, can move around that order. But you look right now, there is no GM under more pressure in the sport. I would even say more than Brian Cashman, than David Stearns. Because here's the thing Brian Cashman has that the Mets don't. They just trade arguably their fan favorite player away. I mean, not trade, but let him go. Juan Soto is an unbelievable player, and I think a great piece to build around. I think Francisco Lindor are great pieces, but they're both in their prime right now. If you're telling me you're going to take a step back next year and try to rebuild, or a fast rebuild, Met fans are not going to wait for that. And when you keep saying you want to be the Dodgers, you want to be a big market team, you want to spend, and I know the payroll at the end of the day will be huge, but you need to show this fan base, and I also think a bit of this locker room. Because how does it look internally if you're someone that's come up through the system? When you've gone through offseason where the Mets spent over $300 million to make sure to get Francisco Lindor, when they paid a king's ransom for aging Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, when they ate that money to trade them for prospects, when they would go out of their way to spend big money in the offseason to try to fill out this roster with pieces, with Juan Soto over $700 million. Players that did not come up as Mets, that started their careers other places. But then you look at Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo, and yeah, Brandon Nimmo got his big contract, and that's why he got moved, because it was too rich. But Pete Alonso basically is the Mets' all-time home run leader. He is a beloved member of this fan base. And you basically told him, hey, go out there and perform, and we'll give you a contract. You know what Pete did last year? Pete Alonso bashed home runs over the fence and led this team with RBIs. If you look, It it wasn't Juan Soto that led this team. Actually, sorry, Juan Soto did have 43, so he was second on the team with home runs, but he had more RBIs than Juan Soto. I just look. It's he had 38 home runs, second on the team, 41 doubles, most of anyone on the Mets last year, 170 hits. The only person with more hits last year was Francisco Lindor. Not even Juan Soto had that. Juan Soto had 152 hits. And I understand that Pete is not a great defensive player, but you know what he did last year? The same thing he did every year. He played 162 games. 162. He's just consistent. And I think what's the frustrating thing is there are many questions about the Mets right now. And the one thing you knew, which you could pin your hat on every single year with Pete Alonso, who I have to remind people is a 5-time All-Star. He is someone that every single season, 55 games. The only season he didn't was the COVID year. He's going to give you, outside that rookie season, he had that incredible year, he's going to hit 35 to 38 home runs. And he's likely going to hit well over 100 RBIs. I understand that he has flaws in his game. Even Juan Soto, for as great he is, he's not a great defender. But Pete Alonso, to me, could have been this team's DH. Maybe they start phasing away from him in first base this year and making the full-time DH. Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? You know what the Mets don't have? It's a full-time DH. But again, your comments, Super Chat, jump to the front of the line. Let's get to some of your comments here. How are you feeling, Mets fans? Again, please like and support the channel. Again, thank you, Chris, for the support as always. So Rez brings up a good point, and I think this is a very good question. I think long-term Soto is going to be the DH, but he's still 26. I think he's going to make the transition kind of what Kyle Schwarber is, around 31, 32. And in that case, the contract would have been over. And that's the other thing that I think really annoys people. Basically, they just upped the market over the Schwarber deal. And here's the difference between Schwarber and Alonso. Schwarber can't play a position. He is strictly a DH. He's 2 years older. The Phillies don't have a problem paying him. And that's the thing that's scary. The Braves are going to get healthier this year. Phillies are still a great team. Where are the Mets? We talk about the Dodgers. What about just in the NL East? Mets right now to me are the third best team until they made their moves. Kev, I want to vent. All right, vent away, Kev. Would love to hear your thoughts on this. And again, comment, Super Chat, jump to the front line. Your thoughts on this Mets decision. Are you more upset about Edwin Diaz? Are you more upset about Pete Alonso? Are you more upset about Brandon Nimmo? Are you more upset about Devin Williams, the attention for him? And, it's the other thing, too, is it's frustrating. Like, all this deferred money with the Dodgers. Like, I don't get why the Mets just can't do that. It's terrible because, again, I think what hurts the most is it's back-to-back days. Like, you didn't even get a chance to even recover from the Diaz thing, and now all of a sudden Pete Alonso is going away. And now you're hearing these lukewarm, like, we're not sure about Pete. But, we could do a platoon next year at first with Paul Goldschmidt, and we can do a platoon with Jeff McNeil. First of all, I don't know about you, but I don't want Jeff McNeil on this team. I'm done with Jeff McNeil. And, okay, we're not going to get Pete Alonso, but we'll go after Paul Goldschmidt, who's going to be 38 years old, played in 146 games last year, and had 10 home runs, 45 RBIs, and hit 274. Okay. That's the big replacement for Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo. Okay. I just don't see it. I really don't. I mean, Do the Mets have internally option? I do think Carson Bench is going to push for the open day lineup, but the Mets tried to go with some young players last year. Vientos didn't work out. Beatty was hot and cold. Mauricio was hot and cold. Maybe they're hoping one of those kids can step up. Until they lock something down, you can't count on them. And like Jeff McNeil, like, is not a great player. I mean, last year, Jeff McNeil, 243 batting average, 12 home runs, 54 RBIs. Yeah, that's what I want out of the first base spot for production. The last 2 years, McNeil's hit under 250 after being a 250, 326, and 270 hitter. He's 33 years old. He hasn't had over 60 RBIs since 2020. And he's only hit 20 home runs once in his career. The last 3 years, 10 home runs, 12 home runs, 12 home runs. Yeah, that's the pop I want at first base. I would trade. I'd rather give Vientos a run at first base than that. And I know the Mets are excited about their prospects, but that's the thing. They are prospects, and you also have to understand and give them room to struggle. Like, you want to bring up Carson Bench so bad, okay, but you better have a backup option, like a Harrison Bader type in center field in case he needs some days off. Unless they're penciling Jet Williams to be a full-time center fielder next year, which, again, I don't think is necessarily a wise decision. And even with this rotation, you have so many young players. Even Noah McLean, who I love, you don't know he's going to pitch that same way. You don't know if he's going to be able to do that for 30 starts. You don't. And if you're going to go into the next season, it's just not a smart investment. If Stearns wanted to tear down the team, he should have traded Diaz. I mean, here's the problem with that, Kev. In retrospect, you're right. But you have to remember at the trade deadline, yes, the Mets were trending in the wrong direction, but they still were aggressive. They still went for it. I'm trying to remember at the time. I still believe they were in first place at the trade deadline. And I think the big thing was we're going to add these bullpen pieces and take off. I get what you're saying, but I still think, like, I would try to trade Jeff McNeil for some pieces. But even the pieces, like the young kids, you don't know what you're getting. Francisco Alvarez, we thought could be a 15 to 20 home run catcher. I don't know if he's going to play 100 games next year. Do they think Francisco Alvarez is going to be the full-time DH? Are they going to go that path? I mean, that's an option. Ronnie Mauricio was inconsistent last year. Is he going to be able to play a full-time role for this team? Again, comments, super chat, vent your frustrations, your thoughts, potential replacements. You don't want to get ahead because these moves, I'm sure they'll make, but Alonso should have been held in high regards by this organization. That, to me, is what bothers me, Rez, is I wonder how it's if you're someone that's come up through the Mets organization, how does it play where this organization will go out of their way to wine and dine Francisco Lindor, go out of their way to wine and dine, Juan Soto. But when it comes to you, it's like, maybe. And I understand Pete is not a perfect player. Pete is not a five-tool player. Pete has an attribute that many think will decline over the next few seasons. And you look at the market, right-handed first baseman bats do not get big contracts. I get all of that. But there is something to be said when he has come up through the system, has been incredibly productive. And just to not give him an offer, if the Mets had given him an offer of 140 for the 5 years, at least show that they had some interest. The fact that it's like, yeah, go on. Yeah, go on. I'm curious how that will play in the locker room. And I also think, too, it's like you'll spend this money on certain players, but you won't spend a little extra on Edwin Diaz. You won't spend a little extra on Pete Alonso. And when I look down at the farm, Carson Bench, I know, has been a big talking point. And look, I think Carson Bench is a really intriguing prospect, but if you're expecting Carson Bench to save the Mets next year, I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. It takes time for these kids to develop. And I even look down there, like, do the Mets have like some first baseman prospect? I know Ryan Clifford was a big first baseman prospect for them for a time. I know Jacob Reimer down in Double-A can play third and first. I mean, Ryan Clifford's at double. I mean, do they think Ryan Clifford, who they remember got in the Verlander deal, lefty bat, 22 years old? But if you're relying on a 22, 23-year-old to win games next year, I don't know how good you're going to be. Because I look at the front, that top of the order, if you bat Lindor leadoff and you bat, let's say, Soto third, who's hitting behind Soto today? And again, I know the offseason isn't over, but who's hitting in this lineup? I just go through this lineup, and what answers do I have? Simi at second. Okay, I know what he is. He's a great defensive second baseman. Shortstop, I know what I have in Lindor. Right field, I know what I have with Soto. I don't have an answer in center. I don't have an answer in right. I don't have an answer at third. I don't have an answer now at first base. I don't have an answer at catcher. I have more of an answer at catcher because at least I'm like, all right, Luis Torrens, Francisco Alvarez, it's something. You know. Looks like we got breaking news in here. So Matt Turner, the pitcher on the Yankee system, is now a Mets on the Rule. I guess is the Rule 5 draft going on right now? Like, again, like I've just been checking on the Pete Alonso and everything, but it's just, it's also one thing too with the Mets. In the grand scheme of things, if you want to argue that the core needed broke up, and for the people that are upset that said, oh, I wanted the core break up, oh, now I'm upset. Well, you got what you wish for. I just look at this and I go, okay. In the grand scheme of things, do I think this core needed to break up? Yes. Did this core win anything with Nimmo and Alonso? Yes. Did this team need to get younger? Yes. But could they have gone 3 years? Like, I just feel like with Diaz is the big one. Because with this one, you just look too, and again, John Morosi and a fractured clubhouse, Pete Alonso is not the problem. It just, to me, like, I just would have given Edwin Diaz, like, I felt like it would have almost basically, okay, they at least kept their closer, they're improving the pitching, which was a big issue, and it's clear they're kind of lukewarm on basically Pete Alonso. Again, I know there's a certain amount of us, but man, can you imagine if you're a Mets and Jet fan right now? In the span of 2 months, if you're a Mets and Jets fan, your teams have traded Sauce Gardner, Quinton Williams, and have lost Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz to free agency. It's not been a good time for the Ets fans in New York, the Mets and Jets fans. It's just has not been the best time for us. So, but I just look at that too. And yeah, the Mets getting, of course, an hour ago, Matt Turner, 26-year-old pitcher. Try and remember, was down at AA, AAA. 5.79 ERA. I'm curious how they'll be with the pitching lab. I'm curious how they're going to implement him too. Again, they've had another lefty in Aaron Rosick from the Twins. They're going to turn them into relievers again with the pitching lab. I'm curious to see how they're going to potentially do that. Now, again, Turner, a big 6'4" pitcher. I mean, I don't think I'm trying to see where he's pitched before. I'm actually curious if I've seen him pitch because apparently he was with Hartford, who, again, is the minor league team I watch all the time. So I'm kind of now trying to rack my brain to think if I've seen him. But again, I guess the Mets are adding some pieces. I mean, JT Realmuto, no, I'm trying to read this. I mean, I don't hate it, but I just don't think with what they have at the catching position right now, they're going to do that. Plus Realmuto, 34 years old. I just feel like they're going to be a little bit – I think they have to be more aggressive in other positions. Like catching isn't the worst spot for them, especially if Alvarez can bounce back after all the injuries last year. I mean, first base, do you go with Josh Bell? And they only traded one. The only trade was Nimmo there. The others they let him free agency. I mean, Josh Bell, could he be a possibility for this team. I hate the Goldschmidt one. Like I just can't do that one. But then the problem with Josh Bell, again, another lefty bat. I think you want to get another righty bat for this team. Bell last year too with Washington, again, bad roster around. Again, it's tough too because he's bounced around between bad teams: Miami, Arizona, Washington. I mean, last year, 22 home runs, 63 ribbies. Not what you'd love to see. Hit 237. Hasn't hit 22 home runs back in 2023. 2024 combined for 19. I mean, not going to be a huge home run guy, not going to be a 30 guy. But could he be someone that the Mets target on this market? Again, the Mets have to make some big moves. Like if the Mets can come out of this with a really nice bat or at least some options, I think that they're going to have to do it through the trade market. And I've kind of been looking at this the same way, that the Mets this offseason were not going to make their biggest impact through the free agency market. It would be the trade market. But it still just feels like you look at this core, and look, it's going to take time to process. This is not going to be something that fans get over overnight. This is going to take a long time to get over. And trust me, it freaking hurts. But you look basically at Alonso, turning down a couple years back. He made $205 million over the 7 years as opposed to $158 the Mets offered. And it's frustrating too, because even when the Wilpons had this team, you had frustration, but you never had this like on back-to-back. I think that's what this is, the Gump Punch, is how it is back-to-back days. And again, when you had this owner that made it seem like the Mets would not be outbid on a player, that the Mets would bully teams with their financial power, and you see Edwin Diaz go for seemingly a reasonable deal, and you see, again, the lengthwise probably a little bit uncomfortable, but I just know that a lot of Met fans, I'm surprised they're not outside Citi Field right now. The big thing is we have to see what they do from here. And again, a lot of people are not going to be happy because they weren't able to do that. And look, the Mets, according to Joel Sherman, never made an offer because they were getting bids for more dollars in a year. So that tells me all you need to know. It didn't really seem like they were serious on them. Let's see. Cody Bellinger first. I mean, I don't mind Cody Bellinger. Again, the part with him, he's 30 years old, and I don't know if they're going to give him more than a 4 or 5 year contract. I just doesn't see that. So, I mean, I could see the Mets doing a couple different things. I know Murikama is definitely someone to keep an eye on. The only hard part with Murikama, and again, I don't know how they're going to fit him on the Dodgers, but it just seems like Murikama is going to be. And again, the thing too is, I know that there's been a lot of speculation, especially with Murikama, how much the Mets have been out there scouting him. Again, probably projects better to a first baseman over a third baseman. But, I mean, it's going to be 25 years old. Again, 22 home runs last year. If they do that, again, it would just with that contract. Because if you're going to give 5 years, I just also don't know how that plays in there as well. Because, so apparently they're saying Goldie potentially, not Suarez, but Goldschmidt in a platoon. I just don't know with Murakami. How are the optics if, let's say the Mets give, even though it would be less than Alonso, but let's say they gave him a 5-year deal. And again, the annual salary would not be close to Alonso. But I'm not sure how the optics look when you have a first baseman who has never played again for your organization. You're willing to go 5 years for him, but Pete Alonso, your all-time home run king, and I understand he's older, but that you wouldn't do that, I think is very alarming. And look, I also think, too, that David Stearns has not helped himself because he's acted like he's the smartest guy in the room, again, smiling a lot and down there. I just think the body language has been off-putting for Met fans. And look, it worked in 2000, the first year with going to the cheap pitching market. But I think the biggest thing for him was not only not recognizing how bad the state of pitching was last year, but not making a move on it earlier or not making a decision. They waited too long to bring the kids up, but also at the trade deadline, I really thought that they should have added a star just to help relieve the pressure of this bullpen. And it's just been a frustrating offseason because we've seen a lot of staff go. We've seen a great first base coach go because of some weird financial situation with the Mets. And you also look, too, Schwarber got a 5-year deal. Schwarber got basically a 5-year deal, basically $1 less million per year, despite the fact that he's, by the way, 2 years older and really doesn't have a position. Pete can at least play first, and that's the thing. Like, even if you want to make Pete a full-time DH, he can play first on a couple situations. Like a situation like let's say Alvarez is red hot and you don't want to take him out of the lineup. You can put Pete in at first base for a day game or a night game and allow Alvarez to rest in the DH spot. It allowed you flexibility. And again, you preach the flexibility. And with Stearns, I think he's destroying their present. I think he has built a very good minor league system. I do think the scouting has been very good. And I think long-term looks better. But the hard part with baseball is long-term is 3 or 4 years down the road. And fans don't look that far ahead. In the current, though, the Mets are weaker in the back end of the bullpen. The Mets are weaker in their lineup. Because, again, when I looked at this lineup and what they've lost, and when they traded Nimmo, I think a lot of us felt that's going to mean they're going to shift to Alonso to at least keep him here. But now the Mets, I mean, let's do the money ball. They're going to now have to replace 63 home runs, 218 RBIs, and 168 runs. And you just look at the players out there, you don't see a combination of two guys that could do that. Maybe in the trade dead market, the Mets could get lucky, but you just don't really see a great avenue to go out there and replace these great players and players that, again, have been good enough. But I think a lot of the thing, too, is how bad last offseason was. How bad it is, too. And the other thing, too, that I think is annoying Met fans, and I get it, is how much David Stearns is going after Milwaukee guys when there's a lot of great guys in the leagues. And I understand that to a point. He was in that system so long, he understands someone. And again, you saw the rumor today that they're going to try to go after Trevor McGill from the Brewers. But when you look at how aggressive he was to make sure the Mets had Frankie Montas last year, and he was an abject failure. And this year, how quick they were to go after Devin Williams. Like, I understand where some people are like, oh, it's good that he got ahead of the relief pitcher market. But at the same token, I'm like, yeah, but I'd rather see this urgency with Edwin Diaz and then move on to him to be the second guy. You know, I'd rather get option A done than the backup plan. And, you know, Devin Williams at $17 million a year, like, we had to give him that $51 million contract, but we'll only stick at 66 and hope Edwin Diaz comes back with an offer from the Dodgers. And look, I don't think all of his moves were bad, but when you look at last season, so much of the fingerprints of why this team failed were on David Stearns. He didn't get starting pitchers that could go length. He didn't develop guys. He didn't bring up players early enough to give this rotation an opportunity. And more importantly, they were relying on too many people outside of their top 4 players to be productive in offense, and they didn't get that. They kept flip-flopping between Brett Beatty and Mauricio, Luis Angel and Cunha. Like, they couldn't just get set, and they didn't have a center fielder. Harrison Bader had a great season for the Mets the year before. They couldn't wait to get him out of town for Jose Siri, who was a disaster, and then Tyrone Taylor. And then it got to the point where Jeff McNeil was playing center. And even Jose Iglesias. just to bring him back as a glue guy or a backup player to me would have been a good piece. But no, we got to move off of him this quickly. So I just look at the moves that he has made, and they're very concerning. Again, it's not to say he's made bad moves, but last year, a lot of the moves he made backfired and backfired spectacularly. The bullpen was bad down the stretch. And according to Ken Rosenthal, the Mets have given no indication they are pursuing outfielders Cody Bellinger and Kyle Tucker. Again, is that a smokescreen? I don't know. I just don't know what the Mets are doing. Like, they have to have a plan. But I'll tell you this: if this Mets team goes in with a lackluster lineup, it's going to be a long season. It's going to be, I don't know about that. That's not a bad idea, though. Trading for McGill's wasted process. Yeah, and I get it. You just given up money. There's a difference between trading. Trading guys, you're trading potential assets. Money is money. And these 3-year deals for Stearns have come back to bite him in the you-know-what. And I still think he's a talented executive. And one thing that this has told you, I do think that David Stearns has full run the baseball operations. Right or wrong, he's going to make the decisions. And if he makes the wrong decisions, he's going to get fired. There's no Steve Cohen meddling. Because I get the feeling if Steve Cohen really wanted to, he could have put in some extra money. But he's being told, we have a plan. We're moving on for them. And the other thing, too, we have to look on, and again, I know this is an uncomfortable discussion for baseball fans, is the impending potential strike after the upcoming season. Is this a situation where one of the reasons they want the 3-year deals is if they miss a season of baseball? I don't know if the contracts defer. I don't know if that's only 1 year. But are the Mets saying, is it worth it for us to invest all this money in these players this offseason where there's a chance we're going to lose a full year of production for Pete Alonso, production from Edwin Diaz? That's not going to help us because there's going to be a strike. I mean, that is something that we don't like to talk about. It's awkward, but it is something. And Kev, I will vehemently disagree with that. I think that was Brodie Van Wagenen. Brodie Van Wagenen let Zach Wheeler out the door. Brodie Van Wagenen, who traded for only his clients. Like Brodie Van Wagenen that had to get Javier Baez and trade Pete Crow Armstrong. Yeah, I think he was a lot worse GM. But look, it is a frustrating day to be a Met fan. I get it. And it's tough because you're being told to follow someone that you haven't fully invested in. And let's be honest, after last season, you feel burnt. I mean, when someone promises you something great and you put in all the effort and you get the rug pulled from under you, I understand the frustration. I understand that you want this team turned around, and I get it. I'm in the same boat with you. And it's tough when you lose a guy like Edwin Diaz, who, again, was the best closer in baseball while he was here. You lose a guy like Pete Alonso, who's a homegrown player and a great talent. And can you make the arguments that the Mets are getting out a year early than a year later? Maybe. But all I know is that today – the Mets are not a better baseball team, and David Stearns has got a lot of pressure. Because I will tell you this, if this Met team, again, starts off with like Carson Benj in left field, they have Jet Williams in center, and they're trying this young team, and if this young team stumbles out of the gate, I guarantee you Citi Field's going to be empty in June. Because fans are going to be so burned out. Fans are not going to – they don't want to sit through this again. Like, they will not buy into the product. Here's the thing. Mets fans, if you give them a product, they will buy in wholeheartedly. They will give you everything that they have. But if you're not going to give them something of substance, they're going to tune it out. And look, the optics of this whole situation are very bad because it seems like the Mets, and again, we don't know everything, but when you hear how much Cohen's looking to invest around the property, and I get it, invest around Citi Field, and look, I give Cohen a lot of credit because Cohen's not just paying in this team. He's investing in the pitching lab. He's investing in the facilities, investing in the Citi Field infrastructure. But when it seems like the Mets won't go that little, to get that little extra money to get these guys back. Meanwhile, you hear about all this money going into the potential casinos. I get where fans are coming from, and I get the frustration. I really do. And I think there's something to be said, especially with Pete Alonso, is Met fans, and this is why I think a lot of Met fans are mad at David Stearns and Cohen, is because, again, they say they're lifelong Met fans. And I really thought about this today. And again, I'm not the oldest Met fan in the world, but I was racking my brain back to Met players that came up that I wanted to see finish their careers here or be lifelong Mets. And there really haven't been great examples. And letting guys go who continue to play, watching them go other places really freaking hurt. Like, I think the big ones obviously are Jose Reyes was one that was a killer. David Wright's the only one that remained, but just the way his career ended was so saddening for Met fans, especially how his health took him out. But then you look at Jacob deGrom, couldn't finish his career here. You look at even older generations, Darryl Strawberry, Keith Hernandez. You look at Doc Gooden. You look at all these different players that the Mets have brought up that you fall in love with and that are good players, and they don't continue on. I mean, Zach Wheeler. I mean, yeah, Zach Wheeler was brought through a trade, but Zach Wheeler was an incredible pitcher, and this team couldn't invest in him. It just hurts. And just seeing guys like Daniel Murphy leaving again, I understand the frustration from a lot of people. I really do. But at the end of the day, it's on David Stearns now. If David Stearns makes the right moves and this team's competing and making a playoff run, we'll have a different opinion of the 2025 offseason. Again, actions will speak louder than words. And what they will do in the next coming weeks, it's a long offseason. It doesn't feel like it, but it is a long offseason. But right now, it feels like they're at the lowest point for the franchise and for the Mets. And all you can do right now is hope that they make the right moves. And I think they need to make a big one. And if they can do it quick, I think that's the most important thing. Because when I look at this Mets team and I look at the landscape right now, the Phillies are still a great team. We talk about the Dodgers. Phillies are a great team. Braves have had so many injuries. They're getting healthier. I mean, you look at even the Nationals and the Marlins. They've been a pain in our butts, and I don't think they're competitive, but they're going to have a young team that's going to get out there. And look, you want to look at history in the long-term thing, you look at this team. They've collapsed with these players in 25, 23, and 21. And realistically, outside of 2024, which again, wasn't an unbelievable run, but maybe that team was closer to what we saw in the back half of 2025, a team with holes. And, as much as we love these players, as much as guys like Pete Alonso have given to this team, maybe in the long run, it is better to move off of him. But you have to also look at David Stearns, and this is the big thing I always say with front office. You have to learn from your mistakes. I think the handling of the Diaz situation, I think that the Mets effed around and found out. And I think they learned a valuable lesson. And it's a painful lesson, but it's a lesson. I think it's most important with Diaz. I don't think they were fully invested in Alonso. I think it's been clear. Because if they did, they would have given him a contract last year. With Diaz, I think the Mets and David Stearns had this, again, arrogance because players are trying to get as much money as they possibly can. And everyone knows the Mets have the biggest checkbook. And basically, I think in their heads, they just kept saying, you know what? Edwin's going to come back to us and we'll get – this is basically the baseline offer. Yeah, $66 million, but we got deferred money. Also, if the Dodgers bump it up, we'll just keep bumping it up until we get to the place we want. Well, the problem is the Dodgers offered something that the Mets can't offer and something that money can't buy. The Dodgers have clout. They've won 2 World Series in a row. If Edwin Diaz wants to win a World Series, and again, he's on a path where he's had an unbelievable career. If he continues being one of the best closers and wins a World Series, does he a borderline Hall of Famer? I mean, that could be definitely in discussion. It's one of those things where if you're Edwin Diaz and you look at the state of the Mets, and it's a bit iffy right now where they're going to be, and you look at the Dodgers, who have won 2 World Series in a row, have shown that they'll do anything to win a World Series. And oh, by the way, you get to play at one of the most historic venues in all of baseball, and you get to play on the West Coast and be and play in beautiful Dodger Stadium. And oh, it's going to be 70 degrees when you come out in April. You don't have to worry about pitching in 35-degree April weather or 35 degrees in October in New York. I think there's a lot of appealing there. Kev, I completely disagree with Jim Duquette, who said losing was a failure of negotiations by Stearns. Context everything. Stearns' MO is to lowball players for weeks. When the Dodgers enter a serious offer, of course, Diaz is going to leave. I don't fully disagree. I think like they could have been more aggressive during the season. I think right after the season, it just felt like the Mets are kind of like, yeah, go test the market and come back to us. The problem is, if you're in an open relationship and that player finds the quote unquote one, guess what? Sometimes money isn't the most important thing or isn't the end all be all. I mean, let's not forget Edwin Diaz has gotten well over $100 million from the Mets. At the end of the day, with the Dodgers, he's going to have made close to $200 million, and he signed a 3-year deal. He might get another bite of the apple at 35. Maybe it's a 1 or 2 year deal, but he might get a 10 or 12 million. He might get a 1-year deal that's a massive contract. I hate Stearns from Happy Biscuits. There's no one replacing Alonso production. No one is protecting Soto. As of now, no. And again, that production is something. And look, even if you bring in a Murakami, you don't know how he's going to adjust to the game. You don't know how he's going to fit in. And the other thing, too, he's a lefty bat. The Mets are very lefty heavy. They need to get another righty bat. And I just look at this Met team. If we were to say, what is the lineup right now? And again, I still think they are going to add other pieces to this lineup. But when I look at the players on this team, we look at the catching position with Alvarez. Alvarez last year only played in 76 games, hit 11 home runs, 32 ribbies, and 787 OPS. Mark Vientos last year had a 702 OPS, 17 home runs, 61 RBIs. I mean, Brett Beatty, 18 homers, 50 RBIs, 748 OPS. And I'm just trying to see what else is here. I'm trying to find Mauricio. Mauricio, 663 OPS, 10 RBIs, 6 home runs. I just feel like this Met team, and again, you look at that bullpen last year. That bullpen outside of Edwin Diaz was not a good bullpen. And I'd say Edwin Diaz was the best player on the Mets last year. I really do. And when I look at, and again, maybe it was partially how he was handled. Maybe he didn't like coming in the 8th innings. We don't know. I do think the Mets get A.J. Minter back. Hopefully he can stay healthy. But when I look at this team and you look at who the best player was, it was clearly Edwin Diaz, like out of this bullpen last year. So again, it sucks. I hate the way the Mets handle this, but this is whatever way you want to look at this. These 24 hours at the very least have been incredibly pivoting. Because the Mets are going to go in a certain direction. We might not like the direction. We not like the way they're going about it. But they have made a decision. And one of the things I guess you can say is at least the Mets are making a decision instead of trying to play both sides. But at the end of the day, it still really hurts. Edwin left the Mets because the Mets pitchers get caught with sticky stuff. And then that I love that. Murakami is not signed for 3 years. Nobody good will give 3 years unless they're older. We can't even stand Stearns smile. Yeah, I think the way he's handled himself has not been great either. And yeah, the bullpen was overused because Stearns didn't get a starter. And that was one of the big things too, is I don't think the Mets need necessarily an ace, but you need guys that can at least pitch 5 or 6 innings. And I just don't think that they've evaluated that correctly. And if you think Nolan McLean's going to be your number 1 this year, I think that's a bad way to go into this season. I love the kid. I love his stuff, but that is way too much to put on a rookie. And if they go after Trevor McGill, it's one of those weird conflicts of interest. Like, okay, are you just trying to bring the Brewers here? Like, I get that McGill's a really good player, but I mean, you're doing everything to get these Brewer players. Are you looking at these other players on the market? And the big thing is, I know he keeps talking run prevention. Yeah, the one thing I can say today is the Mets defense is better than last year, but where are they getting the offensive production? You know, where, and the other big thing I look at too, the Mets are trying to be rational in free agents. If you're the rational one, you know what you finish? You finish second or third. You don't finish first. Free agency, you have to get uncomfortable. Do I think the Yankees were comfortable with Max Fried giving him that long-term of a deal last year? You better believe it. But they still did it. The Mets have to, especially when you have the paybook check that you can give out and you have the money, there's going to be an expectation. Like Edwin Diaz was probably sitting there going, well, they went well over the top for Juan Soto. They went well over the top for Lindor. Why aren't they going over the top for me? And I think the same went for Pete Alonso. Well, they won't go over the top. They'll go over the top for these players that came from outside organization that have done nothing with the Mets. I mean, we knew about this, and this is probably the downside to the Juan Soto contract, because we know everything that happened because it was in a documentary. Not only did the Mets give Juan Soto that incredible contract, they gave him a suite for his family. And again, he's a great player, and certain superstars get superstar treatment. But even though Pete Alonso is not on his level, you don't think Pete Alonso was the homegrown player and for many years the one attraction that brought people to Citi Field, is sitting there going, so we're going to do all this for a guy that's never played a single at-bat for us, but I'm going to be the all-time Mets home run leader, and we're not going to go and above and beyond for me? That's part of the problem with money, is sometimes when you have this propensity to overpay and over-recruit and do all these extravagant things to bring in players, if you don't give your own players that same treatment, I do think there could be resentment. And maybe there was resentment from Diaz. Maybe there was resentment. He's like, they're doing all this stuff for all these other players, but for me, I mean, I've brought them the most memorable entrance in baseball. I brought them all this national attention with how I come out of the bullpen, and they're not going to go the extra mile and just give me a little bit extra and blow me away. I mean, don't forget the first time with Edwin Diaz, the Mets blew him away. He didn't go to free agency. They gave him a great contract. I don't know about Valdez. Again, I think that right now the Mets are going to be on every reliever because they need to improve this bullpen. The Mets not going over the top for Edwin Diaz because he was selfish and played for the World Baseball Classic and then got hurt on Steve Cohen's die. That might be a part of it too. Again, I don't think that's all of it, but I do always remember how Edwin Diaz, when he after that said he'd still play in the World Baseball Classic. And again, my thought at the time, and I said this on this channel, was I feel like if you just signed a brand new contract, and I understand how important the World Baseball Classic is for players, I still just out of respect for my organization. I mean, the Mets just gave Edwin Diaz life-changing money, and he didn't pitch for them that season. So I do think that was a part of it, but I don't think it was the main part. Good point. I did think it would have been better last year to trade for Bellinger and sign Max Fried instead of Soto. Diaz. So again, this is without question a difficult day for Mets fans. This is a frustrating day. You, as a fan, get invested in these great players and these great moments. And look, Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso are gone. But they've given us over these years some incredible memories. They've given us some incredible moments. And look, maybe there'll come a day where we see number 20 up next to number 5 in the rafters. You never know. But it is a frustrating day. But I'm going to end this show with this. Do I give Stearns credit because he seemingly has conviction and understands that something needed to change? Sure. But now actions are going to speak a lot louder than words. And I will tell David Stearns, you know what? I give you credit because as a GM, you can't be emotional. You can't care what fans fan. You have to do what you think is best for your team. But I will tell you this. You are going to be under immense pressure this entire offseason, upcoming season, simply because the Mets have raised the expectations, and this fan base's expectations have been raised. And when you came out last year and you all told us, fill Citi Field, and we did, we feel a bit betrayed because this team wasn't good enough. And right now, we see teams getting better, and we see this team overall really frustrated. But David Stearns is going to have a tall order. He has to improve this roster. If we're sitting here in September and October and the Mets are in the playoffs and the Mets have a shot, we'll look back at this and we'll say it's a footnote. But if we're sitting here in September and the Mets are buried, the Mets are not going to make a playoff where 7 teams now make the playoffs and they look further away, you have to have serious discussion about David Stearns, because it's one thing to be a baseball savant in a market where you don't have money. You have to be creative. But when you're playing with the big boys, when you're up with those big payrolls and those big expectations, because I'll tell you this, Dodgers aren't going anywhere. Phillies aren't going anywhere. Braves are likely not going anywhere. You got to play with the big boys. You're not in the featherweights anymore. You're not in the lightweight division, David Stearns. You're in the ultra heavyweights. And you better start acting like one. And it might not be shelving out hundreds of millions in free agencies. But you know what it is? It's making sure that you need to build this team, that you need to make trades, that you need to build a solid core. And maybe the last core was rotten. Maybe it's still members of this current core that are the rotten apple for the New York Mets. We're going to find out. And I know one thing. Steve Cohen will say he's patient. Steve Cohen has invested a lot of money in this team. But if he feels that his investment's going the wrong way, he'll hire another person. He'll find someone. And again, David Stern has come in with all this pub, all this credentials, all these great things. But you know what? You need to prove you can win. And you need to prove that you're smart. You want to show Met fans you're smart? Make savvy trades to fill up this roster. You want to show that you're smart? Make some big moves, but not giving up your key blue chip prospects. You want to show you're smart? Show us that you are developing young, great players that can come in and perform at a high level. You want to show how smart you are? Make sure that you can show us that, you know what? I'll spend when I have to, but I have an eye for baseball town. Because last year, you gave us doubt. You can say, I have a plan until we see a good plan, and until we see it on the field and we see it winning ball games. It's simple. We're not going to trust David Stearns. We trust him last offseason, letting go of some key players that helped us make great runs like Jose Iglesias and Harrison Bader, where we had to go out and we had to get Frankie Matas. We had to go out there and get Jesse Winker. We had to go out there and get Griffin Canning. We had to go out there at the deadline to get Gregory. So we had to get Ryan Helsley and trade big prospects for him. We had to get Cedric Mullins, who would hit 182 for us. There is a lot that David Stearns has done well. He's built up a really good minor league system. I do think that the Mets minor league system and their player development has been better than I've ever seen. But that better start paying fruition if they're not going to invest money. Because guess what? You look around the league, teams have either stayed the same or they've gotten better. The Mets haven't. Sure, Devin Williams is a decent reliever. He's not Edwin Diaz. The Mets got a really good defensive second baseman. He's not giving you the offense of Brandon Nimmo. And today they lost their greatest home run hitter in the history of the franchise. There's not a thumper out there that's going to give you 35 to 38. I guess the silver lining is at least Pete Alonso is going to be a nightmare for the American League East now going forward. But you watch this, like they need to. They need to show that they have a plan. And again, they can get cute with some things. If they want to bring Griffin Canning back to be the fifth starter, fine. If they want to move off of Kodai Senga, fine. But you've opened up a lot of money. Use it. And the big thing I'm looking at too, you have a lot of holes. You got to fill them. You have an off season. But I would also say this. If you have a move in mind, David Stearns, do it sooner rather than later. Show this franchise and this fan base more specifically that you have a plan that you're executing. Because the longer you sit down in Florida and then eventually in Queens, and the longer it takes for making a move, doubt that has already crept in is just going to creep in more. And how we view this team is going to change. Because here's the thing. You say you're a lifetime Met fan, David Stearns. So you understand the pain we've gone through as a fan base. You understand that this franchise hasn't won a World Series now. This will be the 40th year that the Mets will go without potentially winning a World Series. It's been 40 years this year since 1986. You talk a big game. You act like you're the smartest person in the room. You know what? It's time, David Stearns. It is time. You want to show you're the smartest man in the room? You better do it. Show that you're a smart man, not just a thrifter. Show us that you are looking for value and just not looking for bargains at a flea market. Again, you've had some good hits. I'm not saying you've had all misses, but over the last year, you've given us a lot less reason to believe in you because the moves you've made have been a detriment to this team. And you want to talk about moving on from great players. Guess what? You can do that. It's smart in some ways not to care what the fan base thinks. But if that fan base doesn't see a great product and doesn't see a team that is a competitive team and a team that they are proud of, they're going to show you by not attending. And when people aren't attending, your boss, Steve Cohen, who has that money, can buy anything he wants, might be looking to buy a new head of baseball operations. We'll have much more on the Mets hot stove this offseason. If you're new to the channel, like and bash that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our latest content. Again, if you're new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe. We have all these live streams on YouTube where you can interact with me and provide us with your great questions. And hey, if you missed the show, comment below or check us out wherever podcasts are available. If you can take us in your pocket on a podcast, you can listen to Rich Sports Talk. Again, a frustrating day, Met fans. Try to treat yourself some way. How? I don't know what's your advice, but treat yourself. It's been a long day. And hopefully, David Stearns will somehow give us a nice little present before the holidays instead of just another stocking full of coal that we've gotten so far. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this episode of Rich Sports Talk. We will see you next time.